Hello folks, I'm back with another first impressions video, and this video will be talking about Wave double exclamation point Let's Go Surfing, which is the English translation of a name. The premise of the show is Masaki sees Sho surfing in the morning when he's going out to walk his dog, and he decides he wants to learn surfing, and he basically just falls in love with the idea to learn surfing after seeing Sho surf. He's very much infatuated with the way Sho surfed, and he wants to emulate that specific type of surfing. He just wants to do it. He's just very excited about it, which is the premise of the show. It is a very simple premise for a sports anime series. I watched this the first 5 episodes of this back in February of this year. So February 2021, I watched this in between my assignments, and I could not, for the life of me, I was trying to put a finger on what wasn't feeling right in this show because I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't the CGI, because I have seen that in Run with the Wind, and that's not necessarily enough to get me to dislike a series. Something just felt off about the show, and I couldn't put my name on it. And because of that, I tried to continue watching just to see if any characters started to jump out at me that I would like. And then I think I started to understand what was wrong. The characters don't feel lively. I don't know how to explain this, but these characters just aren't dynamic. There isn't any genuinely animated or dynamic feelings when they share scenes together. If I think of other sports anime shows like Haikyuu or Run with the Wind, or even the skateboarding anime that came out this year, Skate the Infinity, they all have moments where the characters bounce off each other, or tiny gags, or just characters interacting in general together, genuinely, and also doing other things on lunch breaks. It's a little more vibrant. I don't know how to explain it. Masaki in this tries to be the vibrant protagonist, but he just doesn't hit as strongly as other protagonists. Obviously there are moments where I'm happy for the kid, but most of the time I just want to be more invested into these characters, but I'm not. And the moment a certain character had intrigue or a type of past I'm genuinely interested, the person is gone, and the show's execution of this is so terrible that I couldn't finish the episode nor continue watching the series. Basically, the moment a specific character had a bit of conflict intrigue, in which there was genuine conflict that had me intrigued in the series, because in the start of the series, there isn't any serious conflict that makes me excited or interested. If you think of other shows, they usually have specific character-driven conflicts with each other, where either characters have different goals or they're butting heads. Even if they have a specific goal, because there's no genuine conflict, the show feels off, as well as they don't have these interactions with each other where it feels like they're genuine characters. It sort of just feels like they're saying their lines and they aren't really moving that much. The shots are fairly simple. I believe it's mainly just them looking at each other. It's not very exciting. There's no playing off each other. Like I said, there's no dynamic moments between characters where they're just bouncing off each other like Hinata and Kageyama would. If you're looking for a sport anime show with compelling characters, a good conflict, do not watch this show. I would recommend Haikyuu, Run with the Wind, or Skate the Infinity over this show. The show lacks dynamic characters and just generally feels like it's missing a serious conflict. So I would save your time and not watch this show. During the rest of the video, we will be getting into spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled with this show and do plan to watch it, here's your chance to click out of this video, because this is spoiler territory. I'm going to be getting into specifics on why I really dislike this show, and it will be spoiling elements of what happens later on past episode 3. And as I said, the moment you get invested, this is a spoiler, but literally a specific character who was probably the one that I was most interested in show, he had a little bit of conflict intrigue where he had conflict with his family members that we didn't get to see. He picked up a phone call. He just generally acts very secretive of his family. So as an audience member, we very much want to know about his family. And I was very interested in what was going on with him, because it seemed like he has conflict with his family, and that seemed like an intriguing plot to go over. But spoiler alert, in that episode where it dangles the carrot in front of you about this conflict that's intriguing, and you're oh my gosh, what is happening with Sho, he just is gone. He's literally gone, and the execution of him being gone, as in literally dead, is so terrible that like I couldn't even finish the episode. Like I couldn't continue watching.
Why are you the way that you are?
Walk out the door, you see someone that you know, and they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Like, I could barely even finish the episode. I think I made it through it, but like I couldn't watch the series afterwards because he like literally, they just killed him off. The hiding of conflict in terms of like what exactly is going on with Shou's potentially abusive family, I wanted to know more about that because it seems that they were abusive because he never celebrated his birthday before. Like that sounds very like neglectful, so that would have been like an interesting conflict to go over, but instead they literally like snuffed it in the bud out of nowhere right when the conflict appeared that I wanted to like know more about, which pissed me off. Also, the series introduces all these characters at once in a single episode but doesn't really explain much about them, like how two characters might know each other or like why some person invited this guy. Like we aren't really given basic information like this, so you're just left super confused and annoyed that the show isn't telling you much more. And I don't know much about these characters besides they have cool hair and attractive faces. Like this guy, all I know about him is that he's the son of a millionaire maybe, but they were going off rumors, so even that could be skewered because they once again don't even know the guy or ask about who he is. The otaku gets a little more genuine an interaction where like at least we know what he likes, like he likes anime and how he specifically surfs by screaming out special moves. Each character so easily becomes friends with the main protagonist without him really doing anything, but having like good balance and not even technically making it to the finals. So garnering this much interest is odd. If anything, Tanaka and Sho should be the ones grabbing these friends. Speaking of, the first episode itself presents a sort of unexplained reasoning in that Tanaka asks why Masaki so suddenly got into surfing and wants to surf now out of nowhere, and he always embarrassingly avoids answering, which honestly implies he loved the sight of Sho surfing at first sight and probably wanted to do the sport just to be by the guy's side. He just ended up liking it when he tried it out, basically, but it was literally just because he saw a really attractive guy surfing, and that was the reason he wanted to surf. Like, if that's the case, it's slightly insulting to Tanaka, who has been surfing this entire time, and Masaki was never moved enough to join him, which does give the obvious implication that Masaki fell for Sho and became infatuated with his surfing, like he fell in love romantically with Sho. Because of this, I don't feel like this want to surf is motivated for his own individual self, but rather because Sho surfs in such a beautiful way that it has moved him. If that didn't happen, he wouldn't have done it. Like, he wouldn't have started surfing. Because of this, to have Sho just gone, like literally gone from the series, doesn't make sense because he is the motivator and the starter of a series, and along with Tanaka was probably the most interesting character because everyone else isn't really giving much of anything besides copy and paste archetypes, and archetypes can work. Like Haikyuu, Run with the Wind, and Kuroko no Basuke are proof of that, but what makes them is how they play off of each other, how their personalities relate to their backstories, or how they interact with the sport or view it, and just they usually have a bit more to them than, oh, I play the sport too, this is my special move. There's no real cohesiveness to this show or natural synergy between characters, so even if I think two characters have a genuine interesting dynamic, we still don't get enough development of it besides surface level stuff. Like, we don't know why Tanaka was a free surfer and what that necessarily means technically, or how him and Masaki met, and it seems Tanaka decides to compete so quickly on a whim when a more gradual change of mind or realization would be better. Instead, this sort of realization where he wants to compete is just told to the audience directly through dialogue rather than showing indications this may happen. For instance, we never saw Tanaka be competitive with Sho before this. It would make sense if a show showed this dynamic as a practiced or hinted at it, but instead it's thrown in without any particular build up. I was excited after the inciting incident in the first episode because I've never seen a sports anime where the plot starts because of a character's infatuation or crush on another character. So I was excited to see the two's relationship develop, because literally the first episode was romantic undertones, and that Masaki, he has seen Tanaka surf many times, and Tanaka is technically very close level in surfing to Sho. Like, they were pretty much neck and neck. Sho was just slightly better in the competition. So the fact that Masaki literally was so inspired by Sho surfing indicates to me that it was like a romantic reasoning. It's probably not an overt romance, but a subtle one with subtext, because of course they can't go all out on the queer representation because they are cowards and just want to pull in an audience who does want queer representation. I was intrigued by that inciting incident that kicks up a plot, but then the main protagonist just didn't deliver. There was something missing with them. I think Sho was at least giving me some energy that seemed like an actual like person, but for the protagonist, it just felt like something was missing. I don't know if it's because the main characters of other shows like Haikyuu and Run of a Wind are so distinct in their personality, but this main character wasn't giving me what I needed. Other protagonists have clear goals and motivations that pull them forward, but the protagonist doesn't really have any extreme goal, which would be fine if the character's personalities and relationships with one another were compelling enough to be the conflict or spur on the narrative. But because everyone is so stilted and stale, the show sort of falls apart. You know, in other sports anime, each protagonist has a distinct personality. Hinata from Haikyuu has his optimism and drive to win, and his genuine trust in Kageyama. In Run of a Wind, Kakeru's a jaded runner with a traumatic past that is causing him to be wary of Haiji and his pure, unapologetic dreams to run the Hakoden Ekiden. Kuroko from Kuroko no Basket is a barely noticeable person without much presence that is extremely blunt in a hilarious way that is refreshing. They all have something distinct about them, but this protagonist doesn't have that distinctness because the reasoning for him learning to surf is that he is infatuated with Sho. Therefore, Sho becomes the primary person you become interested in as a watcher because you're curious as to why the protagonist has denied surfing all of these years, but suddenly wants to because of Sho. Like, the protagonist is just nice and optimistic, which kind of just feels like any other person that exists. Because of this, the series falls flat, and the person who has some interest and who almost presents an actual compelling conflict is immediately killed off screen, and we get a time skip after his death without a funeral, no contacting his family, no what happened the day after they realized he was dead. Nope, we just get a time skip that leaves everyone in the audience pissed because the interesting plot was cut off, and they killed the character who spurred on the inciting incident of this series. Because he was killed off screen, I was literally so shocked that I didn't believe that they killed him off screen. It showed a shot basically of a storm. The waters definitely killed Sho, like would have had to have killed him. His surfboard goes flying in the air because of the violent waves, and that's the end of the episode. That's what Masaki sees. And then in the next episode, it's a time skip. We don't get anything. This happened to Sho after his vague ass conversation on the phone with a family member. We don't know like what is happening. We don't know if his family's abusive. We don't know like how he was feeling this entire time or like what spurred on this decision. So basically the audience is left in whiplash from this death and wanting more answers, and the show just not giving it to you. That just pisses you off even more, because for me, like, what made me the most livid was that like I was very much interested in the conflict of the family. So even if like they did end up killing off Sho, I felt like they should have at least done like the day after and like trying to figure out what happened and like contacting his family to tell them he died. Like, that would have been so much more interesting instead of having a time skip where basically all the audience members are super confused. I literally had to look up online if Sho was dead because I was in disbelief that he was dead. There was literally, I don't know if it was a Reddit or like on my anime list, but there was a thread where people were like, is Sho dead? I'm super confused. Like, people actually were confused who watched the same episode that I did, and the people were asking in the thread like if he was dead, and everyone in the comments was like, yeah, they use past tense to talk about Sho. He's dead. Like, he died that night. And it's like, wait, what? I'm laughing, but it isn't funny because I'm laughing because I'm like, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, to kill off a character off screen, not like really explain what has occurred. Like, I guess it could be a commentary on the fact that mental health isn't taken seriously and there isn't really any like explainable reasons for this. These things just sort of like happen suddenly. Like, that is sort of truthful to real life. Usually nobody expects this type of tragedy when it does happen, but it just didn't felt respectful to show to not at least like show a funeral or like the contact with the family or like literally anything to indicate characters like trying to like put respect to Sho's existence and like his life, because everyone at the school isn't acknowledging that Sho is dead. It only seems to be Mazuki who is like actually like still feeling the repercussions of his death. That whiplash, the fact that no one's talking about him or like mentioning what has happened, and we're all generally just confused, and Mazuki's just super upset and very sad and mourning the death of his very close friend, potentially the person he like kind of fell in love with at first sight. That is like super messed up that like the show handled it in that way, and because of that I had to just drop the series because I could not handle that disrespect to Sho's character, that they killed him off screen, didn't show his funeral, while everyone else is just sort of like, oh, we moved past this already. Like, what? Why would you do that to me? Why would you skip so many months like so that Mazuki is the only one grieving over this? Like, why would you handle this death this way? It just made me so upset. Because of this reasoning, I cannot recommend the show. This incident happens, I believe, in like within the first 5 or 6 episodes. So the lack of the audience's understanding of the point system, the only slight brief training they did, and the gloss over of interesting developments, or the hiding of conflict in terms of what exactly is going on with Sho's potentially abusive family, makes the show not so great. It's all of these elements that I just didn't like. I am not speaking on from watching the entire series, but from the first impressions, the show just wasn't very enjoyable experience to watch. So like, I would say it's just like a below average anime series. I'm not gonna lie and tell you like that there is an audience for this. People who want to see really attractive characters or cool designed characters surfing, or like cool designed characters just on the screen with cool hairstyles, like there is an audience for that. Like, there's a reason why Free was originally a commercial or whatever. Having good designs is great, and I usually do love shows with great designs, but like for me it isn't the bare minimum quality of a good show. There has to be some sort of conflict that pulls me in. Otherwise, I just don't get attached to the series. I would not recommend it. Do not watch the show unless you just want to like look at some really nicely designed characters. Then I guess you could watch it. But like for me, it just I would just not waste time doing that. I do not want you folks to suffer through what they literally did to Show. But I hope you enjoyed this video of me going through literally the total mess that was the show. Like, it was a hot mess.